Hi everyone. Well, now that this perimeter wall has been beautifully restored by our Syrian master stonemasons, it's time to start work on a new set of external gates. Now, I've already installed a hardwood post on either side because these gates are going to be a little over 2 meters high and around 90 centimeters each in width, so extremely heavy gates indeed. Now, I myself have a carpentry background, and I've built many similar gates for clients over the past few years, but I'm especially looking forward to this project. So let's get cracking. Okay, my friends, well, before we begin, let's talk setup, because as we all know, preparation is key. Now, one of the most important things we need when we are building large gates or heavy pieces of furniture is a firm and level workbench. So here we have a sheet of 18mm marine ply sitting on these adjustable saw horses. Now, these particular saw horses are C700s made by a company called Tough Built, fully adjustable, and believe me, they are tough built. They allow us to slide a piece of 4x2 timber in either side to keep this sheet of ply from bowing during the gluing and pinning process. Now, we also have a selection of battery tools. Here, Milwaukee is my tool of choice because I only have to purchase one set of batteries. A circular saw, combi drill, brad nailer and an impact driver. Also, I'm going to be using D3 water resistant wood glue, which is fabulous in a country like Cyprus, which has such extremes in temperature. A set of heavy duty G-clamps, a pair of even heavier duty sash clamps just to get this job done. So I've checked that my workbench is firm and level. Now let's talk chop saw. This particular machine, the Makita LF 1000, is what we call a flip over saw. Not only is it a crosscut saw with a simple adjustment, we can flip over the bed to run our lengths of timber through. So a very versatile machine indeed. If you have a small workshop, if you're a DIYer or even a small businessman, then the Makita LF 1000 is the machine for you. Believe me, I have used this machine extensively. So now we have our setup, let's talk material. So my material of choice for these heavy duty village gates is this 30mm thick Norwegian pine, a very attractive material indeed. These particular boards are rebated on both sides, which will not only be more aesthetically pleasing as a gate, but it will make the gluing, pinning and clamping process much easier. Now, these boards are around 2.5 meters in length, so I intend to make the gates oversized and trim them off at the very end. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is take the rebate off of one side of our first board, and that will be the edge of our finished gate. We have our eye protection on and our fence guard on the saw, which is so important. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to clamp this board with the rebate removed to the edge of this sheet of ply, because I know this marine ply is straight. So I'll put a steel clamp at both ends just to hold that in place. And then we can work away from this position. The opening of the gateway is a little over 1.8 meters, so each of these individual gates will need to be around 90 centimeters. So once again, I'll make them oversized and trim back. Now the method I'm using for these village gates is the Z-frame method, which is basically 3 cross rails on the reverse of the door and 2 diagonals. Now the idea of these diagonals is that it transfers the weight and the force of the outside of the door back into the hinges. It is very important that we use plenty of this D3 exterior wood glue on both surfaces, and be sure that you have 100% coverage. Now I have the small wooden wedge that I used earlier, and I'm going to smear that glue along these boards. And on the reverse of that rail. So that the 2 surfaces will be completely bonded with no dry patches whatsoever. I like to place the 2 pieces of timber together and slide it back and forth just for maximum coverage. Then when I'm happy, I have some 50mm brad nails in this nailer that will just hold that piece in place until I put some larger screws in at a later date. The beauty of these narrow gauge brad nails is that they leave a very small hole to fill later on, and they'll hold that rail solid while that glue is curing. So having marked the angles for the diagonals, it's time to take them to the chop saw, cut those corners off and try it in place. And there we have it, a snug fit. There it is, another snug fit, and the Z-frame is really taking shape now. I just mark the left and the right so I know exactly where to apply my glue. at this stage you cannot afford to scrimp on your adhesive. Get plenty on and it will pay dividends. And then off of the two surfaces. Once again, a few 50mm brad nails to hold that in place. Each of these rails on the reverse will have 2 rows of 4 by 50mm screws. That's a total of 72 screws per gate. So that's the first gate for our village property completed, but I still have a long way to go. I still have to make the second gate, trim them both to size, sand them, fill them and hang them. But for today, I think it's time for a cup of coffee and a hot shower. Bye for now. So I need to trim these doors to 10 millimeters under 2.2, so 2190. And I know that I have to clamp my straight edge 38 millimeters away from the edge of this saw. Both doors cut precisely to length. Now it's time for the initial sanding. And for this, I'm going to use a belt sander because it's more aggressive and it will take off those high spots a lot quicker. For the final sanding, I'll use a palm sander. So we have a 80 grit paper on this, which will really tear off those high spots. Before we begin filling, we're going to clean off our filling blade with our palm sander. Now, to fill these 70 or so screw holes in the reverse of the door, I'm going to be using our D3 exterior grade super wood glue with some of the fine sawdust, and I'm going to mix those two together because I know that this sawdust is a perfect match for this door. So we're going to put a little heap of wood glue, now not too much because it's around 25 degrees today, so I expect this glue to dry pretty quickly. Now, I'm going to put a heap of this sawdust and just take a small quantity and just keep folding it into that glue. Until we have good, even mixture. And you can see the colour is very close to this Norwegian pine. Then we're going to take a small amount, press it into those screw holes. As I say, I expect it to dry very quickly today. Around 4 hours later, after 3 cups of coffee and a cheese and pickle sandwich, this filler is rock hard. The sun came out and it really was searing in this little courtyard, so that filler is bait solid. So let's crack on and rip it off. really cannot rush this process because the finish of the door depends solely on how much time you put in to the preparation. Remember, we're not looking for perfection here. This is a traditional Cypriot village. It's more important that these doors are made well and are able to withstand the extreme weather we get here in these mountain villages. Now that these heavy-duty entrance gates have been made, filled, sanded, second filled and sanded again, it's time to remove that dust. And the best tool for the job that I find is my powerful Milwaukee leaf blower. It really does get the job done. In just a few seconds, there isn't a speck of dust on these doors. For my wood stain, I'm going with this UV5 walnut stain from Pelalac, which is perfectly suited for the extreme temperatures we get here in a typical Cyprus summer. Now, I have a small quantity in a previous tin that I intend to water down so that that first coat of stain soaks deep into the wood grain of this Norwegian pine. Whenever possible, it is always best to whisk your paint or your stain, especially if those tins have been sitting in your garden shed for several months or even a year. Okay, I think that is sufficiently thin for the first coat. It is very important that all of your end grain receives as much stain as possible, because this is where the water can penetrate the easiest. These doors will eventually have between 4 and 5 coats before they're ready to be hung. This first coat is going to dry incredibly fast, having been watered down, and the temperature here in Cyprus is around 25-26 degrees today, so we should be able to get between 2 to 3 coats on today. And maybe another 2 coats tomorrow. You'll notice I always brush with the grain, because I think you achieve a more natural finish. Now that these hefty entrance gates have been made each receiving 4 coats of that superior quality walnut wood stain. They are ready to be installed on our perimeter wall. So, due to the sheer weight of these gates, each one will be hung on these heavy gauge 60 centimetre strap hinges using these meaty 50mm coach screws. So I'm building these gates to last. You can hear we have a beautiful collared dove providing the soundtrack this morning. Now, I've also made this hefty 40 by 30mm doorstop that I'll install first onto those 150 by 50mm doorposts that have already been stained and pre-installed. So, with the collared dove accompanying us, let's get cracking. Firstly, I've installed these temporary spacers that will allow me to fix this doorstop at the correct distance away from the edge of my doorpost. Now, I'll just pin them in place at the beginning with these 50mm brad nails. That's the doorstop installed. Now it's time to carefully remove those spacers. This is the beauty of using the brad nailer for temporary fixings. It leaves very little in the way of damage. So now that the doorstop is installed at the correct distance, I've allowed between 2 and 3mm tolerance for extra coats of that walnut stain on the doors. The ground beneath the entrance is still extremely uneven, so I'm going to have to use a selection of timber and plastic packers to prop those doors in place before installing those strap hinges. Wow. When I say these gates are extremely heavy, I mean it. And you have to stand it in place and use our packers underneath. So I'm thinking another 18mm or so, so I have this piece of marine ply. So I'm going to install a 5mm packer at the top on the hinge side, and I'll do the same at the bottom so we have an even gap all the way down. Final tap to make sure we're snug against those packers. When I'm completely satisfied with the spacing and those plastic packers are tightly in place, I'll install a clamp in the top corner of this gate to hold it firmly in place while I install those strap hinges. Now I'm going to mark the centre of each of these cross rails for our hinge position. This is 110 millimeters, so 55 millimeters here, 55 millimeters here, and I'll draw a faint pencil line. I'll repeat that on the other two rails. Now it's important that we offer up our hinge and mark the centre of all of these screw holes. As soon as we have our hinge in position with that pencil line running nicely through the centre of these holes, we're just going to pop the drill through a few millimeters. And in our doorpost too. Remove the hinge, and I intend to pilot these holes because these coach screws are heavy gauge. The screws I've chosen for the doorposts are 100mm coach screws that are really going to hold these heavy duty gates in place. Now it's time to install these bolts, and for this I have my little Milwaukee impact driver. Place the first bolt in the hole. And I won't drive them all the way home until I have every coach bolt in place. See, 6 50mm coach bolts in place. I'll just change the bit because it's a slightly narrower gauge coach screw for the doorpost, but 100mm long. And that really did pull the gate back in place. That's the first of the 3 strap hinges installed on this particular gate. Now we just have to repeat that process. Now that those 3 heavy-duty strap hinges have been installed on this entrance gate, it's time for the moment of truth to remove those packers and open this door for the very first time. Here goes. Wow. I'm pleased to announce that it glides effortlessly. Well, that's the second of these hefty courtyard gates installed, and it's time to remove those wedges and the clamp once again. And check the action, so to speak. And once again, it glides effortlessly on these hinges. Wow. Considering each door is probably between 60 and 70 kilos, they really are featherweight now. Now I'm expecting these two doors to bind. Well, I've constructed them that way so I can plane them in beautifully to get a nice even gap. Now with interior doors, we use what we call a penny gap, which was the width of an old penny. But because we have such extremes in temperature here in Cyprus, from 40 degrees between July and August, and maybe down to 0 in the depths of winter, we need to put a slightly larger gap, but they will still look beautiful nevertheless. Around 0.5 millimetre there. So I'll just set myself up a little bit better here. Now that is the precise gap I was hoping to achieve. Now it's just time to sand this raw edge and give it a coat of that walnut stain, which is going to dry incredibly fast today. It's around 26 degrees here in this mountain village in Cyprus. This wood stain is good for around 5 years under normal conditions, but I'll be restaining these doors every 2 years. Now I'm going to install one of these 9-inch spring-loaded chute bolts onto the top of each door to hold them firmly. Now, because the header is slightly proud of the doors, I'm going to have to let the keep in slightly with a hammer and chisel. While that's drying, we can position the chute bolt. These Swanson roof framers squares really are ideal for any form of carpentry. They come in this 12-inch and a 6-inch version, and I highly recommend them. And there it is, that's the first 9-inch chute bolt installed, and it really is holding this door incredibly firm. So now for the second door, another chute bolt in the top and one midships, but a very good product indeed. Now I'm going to install one of these chute bolts in at the midway point. Each of these bolts will take a padlock for extra security. And those, my friends, are solid. Alright, well, to finish off these colossal courtyard gates, I've installed this 45mm by 6mm overlapping strip for added privacy for that courtyard within, and these steel studs. Now, in a world of plastic and disposable tat, it is so difficult to find original hardware, but I managed to locate this little backstreet ironmongery store that still stock them. And I believe they truly set off these gates beautifully. I'm absolutely thrilled with the results, and I hope you like them too. Bye for now, my friends.